Hi everyone, my name is Matt. This is me, myself and UI, and I think when I named this session I didn't realise it was going to sound like me telling a life story of how UI shaped me as a person or anything like that. That's not what it's going to be about, but I will just do 10 seconds on who I am. I'm a senior consultant at Avanade in the Power Platform team, and I'm also a co-organiser of the Newcastle Power BI user group. If anyone's based up in the north and you want to get involved in a user group, please just have a chat with me or come along to one of our monthly sessions. So, why are you here? Maybe this is just the closest room to where you were sat in there, or maybe you want to learn a little bit about what UI is. I'm by no means a UI or UX expert, but hopefully today I can teach you a little bit about what it is, how it differs from UX, why you should care about it, and how we can actually use it in reporting, and specifically Power BI. So what actually is UI? So UI stands for user interface, and what it basically means is the look and feel of our application or piece of software. It's the aesthetics. UX, on the other hand, is all about the user experience, how you actually feel when using that application. And I think the ketchup bottles here give us a good sort of analogy for that. I think we've all struggled with the bottle at the top when there's just a little bit of ketchup left in that bottle. It's a horrible user experience, but maybe it looks quite nice, it's quite stylish, traditional bottle style. These two kind of, for me, give a very clear, obvious example of the difference between UI and UX. So, in a little bit more detail, there's sort of three key areas of UI that we might want to think about when looking at building Power BI reports. The first one is interactivity. So that's any elements of a report that we're interacting with and how do they behave. So this could be buttons that are navigating between pages. It could be the filter pane when you change a certain filter. We've also got visual design. So this is how are we applying different design styles to our visuals. What fonts are we using? What color schemes are we using? Anything that derives that look and feel of our visuals. And lastly, information architecture. So information architecture is all about how we organize and label our report content. There's a great bit of research on eye patterns and when you look at a computer screen, how your eye moves across that screen, depending on what type of screen you're looking at. So if you look at a Google search that's just kind of just in a long list, you'll use what's called an F pattern. And this is your eyes moving from left to right, down, etc. Whereas when we're looking at a screen which is a little bit less structured, like a report or a dashboard, we tend to use what's called a Z pattern. This is scanning the screen sort of in a zigzag format. And this is important to remember when building our reports, and probably why you'll see a lot of reports that have your headline figures at the top or key information in that top left area of the screen. So, in terms of a UI toolbox, there's a few sort of elements that we could actually build in Power BI Desktop to create a template file. And these are split into 4 different categories. Input controls, this is anything where a user is interacting to input some information, whether that's changing a slicer in the filter pane or in the slicer visual, or it could be with the integration with Power Apps, it could be entering information into a form. I've also got navigation, so this is drilling down, drilling through any way that you're navigating through your report. Information, so anywhere that we're visually representing data, even if it's a text box, if it's a KPI card. And then lastly, containers. This is a little bit more of an abstract idea, but essentially anywhere where we can bundle certain data elements together. So this could be a specific report page that you're bundling certain visuals together which are focused on sales. Or it could be in the Power BI service where we've got apps where we can build in reports into the same application. So at this point, you're probably wondering, why should I care about this? All I want to do is get my data into Power BI, build my report, and let the end user figure it all out. Well, hopefully I can convince you that we should care about this for a few reasons. Firstly, users may not always be technical. They may not have used Power BI before. They may not have even used reporting before. So we want to make their experience of using your report as easy and slick as possible. Users also judge reports very quickly. Within the first few seconds, they'll intake what the look and feel of that report is and make a judgment on that. imagine going on a website and you're looking to buy something. How that website looks and feels is probably going to be a big factor in whether you buy it or not. The same applies in Power BI reporting when our users are sort of buying into what we're trying to do. And lastly, users care about usability, likability, and may have accessibility requirements. Just touching on that last point, there's a great blog from Data Wrapper. It's a 3-part blog, really worth checking out, and it's all about how we should consider accessibility requirements when building Power BI reports, specifically people who are colorblind or color weak. This is one key example of where we don't always have to think about colors when changing our report to facilitate these requirements. You can see in this example, the visuals on the right is what someone that's green blind would see, which is about 1% of men, slightly less for women. So as you can see, there's not much differentiation in the colours, and the left is what people with normal vision see. To make that easier for a green blind person to use, we don't necessarily have to fix all the colours to make sure that they can see them all well. We could just move our data labels into our pie chart and remove the need to make that connection between the visual and the colour. Or you could just not use a pie chart. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation. Hopefully you've all got a little bit of pen and paper on you. And I want to try and prove a point, so bear with me for a second. I think that when we build our reports, we should build the UI in such a way that it becomes invisible for the end user. They should use it like any other sort of application or software that they use. So you can tell me what logo this is. Yeah, Amazon. We've all seen it before. So let's say you're on Amazon's website. How do you get to the basket? Anyone know? Where would you navigate? Sorry? Top right. But if I asked you, what does that basket icon actually look like? I'm going to give you 10 seconds, see if you can scribble down on a bit of paper or on your phone or whatever you've got. See if you can come up with what that basket icon actually looks like, and we'll see if anyone can get it spot on. Anyone going to try? So it looks like this, which probably you may have got close, but I don't think when you're on Amazon's website looking for that basket area, you're scanning the page looking for that icon. You just know intuitively that it's in the top right, probably because you've used the website a lot, but also because that's the way Amazon have built it. They've built the UI in a way that it's so easy and natural for you to go to that top right of the screen. So I think we should build Power BI reports in the same way. We should make them as easy and natural for our end users to use. So how can we do this? Well, the first thing we could do is create calls to action and make them really obvious and predictable. A key example in Power BI is the drill through option in something like a matrix. We shouldn't necessarily assume that an end user is going to know to right click on a cell, go to the drill through option and then select the correct page. We could create a button which creates that call to action for the end user to click on a cell, which then highlights the button for them to move to that navigational page. We want to remove visual noise, so anything that isn't telling the story of your data, we should remove from our charts, whether that is grid lines, data labels, axis titles, anything that isn't helping the user answer the business question for that visual, we should remove to make it as clear as possible. And we want to minimize the time to insight, reducing the thinking time of our end users and the number of clicks needed to get from opening up our report to getting some insight from it. That should be a key area for us to look at. And lastly, there's the cart principle. So this is commonly used in website development, but I think it does apply in reporting as well. Contrast, making sure we're using contrast not just wherever in our report for the sake of it, but using it to highlight certain data points that we want the end user to focus on. Alignment. Imagine reading a book and every single line is starts at a different point. We want to make that process, remember when I talked about the Z pattern, make that process for the user as easy as possible. And repetition. So this is all about keeping the same icons or areas of your report repetitive across the pages, whether you've got a navigational button or a bookmark, that's used across multiple pages, use the same icon, keep it in the same place, just like the Amazon basket. And proximity, which I know is one of the Gestalt principles, it also applies here in terms of keeping closely related data points together to highlight them. So, enough chat about UI. Hopefully you understand it a little bit better now. I'm going to jump into Power BI Desktop and show how we can start to build up a bit of a template file, and then I'll show you how we can do a couple of cool things in Power BI themes, which you may or may not already know about. Okay, so let's say we're starting off with a blank Power BI report. What's one of the first things we can do to sort of create a bit of a skeleton for our template? Well, we could build a header and footer. Now, you could do this with objects. You could bring in certain objects in the insert pane, or what a lot of people do is tend to build an image on PowerPoint or Canva, something like that, and then you can simply upload that as your background image. You can then keep that consistent across your report and make sure that certain data elements don't cross over these sort of header and footer lines, for example. We can start to look at containers. So as I mentioned earlier, containers are about grouping certain data objects together. Before you even get to building your report and looking at the data, you could think about, where are my slices going to be? Where is my content cards going to be? Organizing your report page before you've even used any of the visuals. We can start to think about objects. So how do we want our buttons to look? What happens when I hover over an unselected button? What fonts do we want to use for our slices? What kind of icons do we want to use to navigate to certain pages? I know one of the most commonly asked questions is, can we get that in a table form? Well, you could do something like this, where you create a button that changes from a graph to a table, make these icons consistent across all your reports, and hopefully you never have to answer that question again. We could do the same for visuals, so using consistent color schemes, using consistent fonts to make sure that these are standard across our reports. We could do things like create custom tooltips. Again, nothing fancy here, but building up this estate within our Power BI template file is going to make it so much easier when someone's building a new report. They can just start from this file rather than from scratch. We could also do things like build a custom filter pane. There's a great Guy in the Cube video on how to do this, so I'm not going to go through it now, and I'm sure Patrick explains it much better than me. But essentially this is just building a custom filter pane. If you want to use the slices rather than the built-in filter pane, you can build a collapsible filter pane within your report that doesn't take up space on your page. Okay, so I think I'm about good for time, so I'm going to now show you how we can utilize themes. So for anyone that hasn't really looked at themes much in Power BI, what they essentially do is give you the ability to set all your settings for things like colors and other settings within visuals, such as default settings, whether you're using titles, fonts, that sort of thing. So if I go and customize current theme here, we can see that Power BI Desktop gives us a few inbuilt options. You can change your sort of standard theme colors, you can look at sentiment colors, but really this is just scratching the surface of all the different settings that you can use for themes. So I'm going to show you one example of a way that we can use the JSON. So if I go back here actually and save the current theme that we've got in our report, that's fine, and then jump to Notepad++. You can see we get a theme like this, very, very simple at the moment. All we've got is some standard data colors using the hex codes. What we can do is expand this and use some additional settings such as backgrounds. So remember before I had an image of the background that I wanted to use and then I uploaded it to the report page. That's great, but when you create a new page, you're going to have to do that every single time. Or if you've got a suite of reports that you all want this background to be on, you're going to have to do this to every single page. What you can do is take your image, convert it to base64 or SVG, and put it within the theme JSON like this. And then if we upload it back to Power BI, so let's browse for our theme. I think it was this one. what we should then see is every time we create a new page, we automatically get our background, and it should apply to every single page that's already within the report. You could then roll that out across all of your reports, and you know that you've got your standard background to use. We could then go a little bit further with this, so we could look at things like theme generators. So I don't know about any of you, but I really don't fancy going through this JSON file and trying to work out what the schema is and all the settings that are within that. So as there usually is the case, someone in the community has done a good way around this. Oh, I should mention the background image I got from Data Mozart article, which is a great article, you should check it out. So there's two main theme generators that I like to use. There's one from Power BI Tips, which I'll quickly show you. So with this one, you can create a palette. So let's say stick with our SQL Bits Welsh Dragon theme. We can add a few colors in here. Let's create slightly lighter, maybe a green for good. Okay, that's enough. So once you've created your palette, you can then go into the properties page, and you can either select a certain visual to change what the settings would be within that visual, or you can use the global properties. And as you can see in here, there is tons. So I don't think you're ever going to get bored going through all of that. There's enough there to keep you busy. This theme generator is great. I was speaking to Mike yesterday about it, and I know there's a lot more to come with it. For example, you can see in this area on the right here, you can actually, using just this website, start to see what your visuals would look like as you're building your theme within the page. But I've only got a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to quickly show you the last thing, which was the theme generator by point. Now, there's two advantages to this theme generator that the Power BI Tips one doesn't have, which is you can upload your theme to start with, rather than starting from scratch. And you can also upload custom icons. So I'll show you how that works. Let's upload the theme that we had originally. So there's this one. Go to our global settings and click on icons. If I just upload a couple of images, let's say in our conditional formatting we're just not happy with the inbuilt ones, upload those. Let's download that. Let's call it theme with icons. I'm going to go back to desktop and upload that. Hopefully that worked okay. Now if we go into something like our matrix visual here and go to conditional formatting, you can see we've got our custom icons available for us. So the use cases for this are obviously great, and it's pretty simple to do. The theme generator allows you to do it in just a few clicks rather than messing around with a JSON file. The last time I demoed this, it was just after the February update when they changed the JSON schema, and this part of the demo did not work at all. But it now works, and they do patch the generator when there are updates from Microsoft. So that's good to see, and you can see that on their website as well. So, jumping back to the deck. So hopefully today, I asked you at the start why you were here. Hopefully it wasn't just because this is the closest room. Hopefully you learned something about UI and how we can use that in Power BI. I think I've got 1 minute left, so if there's any questions. This is my first time speaking at SQL Bits. If you can give me some feedback, I really appreciate it. No need to be nice, as critical as possible. There's my info if you want to get in touch. If there's not much time now, I'll hang around for any questions. That's it, thanks. Was there any questions?
So, what's your sort of maybe personal opinion on changing the resolution on whenever you're building reports? Do you ever change it? If the client doesn't ask for it.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think probably don't practice what you preach. Oh, sorry, yeah. The question was, what's your personal opinion on changing the resolution within the Power BI report pages? I have done it before when there was very specific requirements for it from the client, but I generally wouldn't recommend it. When you publish the service, you get into all sorts of problems when changing between full screen, fitting the screen. Generally, you're best off using what's inbuilt, unless you're using like a custom tooltip page or something like that. Yes. Yeah. Both. So it was changed by. Sorry, the question was. I showed at the end about I mentioned the JSON changing for the theme. So that was changed by Microsoft when they did their February update. The theme generator, both of them, then had to update their generators to sort of accompany that. You try and upload. Yeah. So the question is, what happens when that changes? When you try to upload that theme JSON into Power BI Desktop, it just throws an error. Good question.
We really appreciate your enthusiasm to ask your questions, and we invite you to do it, but could you possibly take it to the community zone?